The sun was barely peeking over the horizon on a chilly October morning in 2024 when I found myself tangled in a battle I never saw coming. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and I've been living quietly on a modest 5-acre plot in Willow Creek, a small town nestled in the rolling hills of Northern California. The land had been in my family for generations, passed down from my grandfather, Samuel, who taught me that a man's word and his land are his legacy. That morning, I was sipping coffee on my porch, planning a simple task: fix a sagging section of fence that had been battered by time and weather. It was the kind of job that required a shovel, some sweat, and a little patience nothing I hadn't done before. But by noon, I'd be staring down a sheriff's deputy, my tools confiscated, and a neighbor who thought she owned the whole damn town breathing down my neck. It all started when I fired up my old backhoe around 8 a.m. to dig post holes. The work was straightforward: dig 3 feet deep, set new posts, pour concrete, repeat. I was halfway through the second hole when I saw her storming across the field like a general marching to war. Victoria Langley, 55, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, lived in a $5 million estate that loomed over my weathered farmhouse like a glass and steel castle. She was dressed in a tailored blazer and designer boots, her auburn hair pulled back so tightly it looked like it hurt. "Stop that racket immediately," she bellowed, her voice dripping with the kind of authority that comes from years of getting her way. "You're violating HOA regulations, and I won't stand for it." I wiped the sweat from my brow and tried to keep things civil. "Morning, Victoria. I'm just fixing my fence. It's on my property, and I got all the permits." I even pulled out my phone to show her the county survey, pointing to the boundary line that put my work well within my rights. But Victoria wasn't interested in facts. She gestured toward her mansion, its floor-to-ceiling windows glinting in the sunlight, and launched into a tirade about visual harmony and community standards. She claimed my digging was an eyesore that could tank her property value. I held my ground, explaining that the fence was 20 feet inside my line and didn't need HOA approval. That's when her face turned the color of a ripe tomato, and I knew this was about more than a few post holes. What I didn't know then was the real reason for her fury. 15 years ago, Victoria's family had owned my land. When her husband, Richard, tanked his real estate business, they'd been forced to sell the 10-acre parcel to my grandfather for a fraction of its worth $600,000 in a desperate fire sale. Richard had since rebuilt his fortune, and Victoria had clawed her way back to the top of Willow Creek's social ladder. But she'd never forgiven my family for stealing what she saw as her birthright. She'd offered to buy the land back twice since I inherited it, and both times I'd politely declined. This fence wasn't about aesthetics, it was about power. "You're breaking the law," she snapped, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff. You're using dangerous equipment and threatening me." I couldn't believe my ears. Threatening her? I was standing in my own yard with a shovel. But she was already on the phone with 911, her voice trembling with fake panic. "I need help. My neighbor's using heavy machinery and acting aggressively. I feel unsafe." 20 minutes later, Sheriff Daniel Harper rolled up in his patrol car. I knew Daniel from around town, a fair man with 25 years on the job and a no-nonsense attitude. I handed him my deed, survey, and permits, all in order. He walked the property line, checked the markers, and turned to Victoria. "Mrs. Langley, everything here is legal. Ethan's within his rights." But Victoria doubled down, insisting I was a menace to the neighborhood. Daniel sighed, muttering something about another HOA circus, and then dropped a bombshell. County rules required a 48-hour cooling-off period for neighbor disputes, meaning I had to stop work. He took my backhoe keys and handed me a warning citation, apologizing as he did. "Procedure, Ethan. You know how it goes." Victoria's smirk was pure venom as she watched Daniel drive off. "Learn to respect your community," she said, smoothing her blazer. "This town has standards, and I enforce them." I looked her dead in the eye, my grandfather's words echoing in my head. "Patience, Ethan. The system works if you let it." "We'll see, Victoria," I said quietly. Her smirk faltered just for a second, and I knew she'd underestimated me. By lunchtime, I was fuming in my kitchen, staring at the citation. That's when my neighbor, Mrs. Lin Nguyen, knocked on my door. Lin, a 70-year-old widow who'd moved to Willow Creek from Vietnam in the 90s, handed me a USB drive. "I saw everything from my window," she said, her voice steady. That woman lied to the sheriff. Lin had recorded the entire confrontation, capturing Victoria's fake tears and exaggerated claims in crisp 1080p. I've been fixing Lin's outlets for free for years, just because that's what neighbors do. Now, she was repaying the favor in a way I never expected. I took the video to the sheriff's office that afternoon, along with my permits and survey. Daniel watched the footage twice, his jaw tightening. "I've seen this play before," he said. "Rich folks using the law to bully people out. But county rules tie my hands until tomorrow." He warned me Victoria had friends in high places: city council, the planning board, even a local paper. Sure enough, by 4 p.m., she'd unleashed a campaign to paint me as a rogue neighbor. An HOA email blasted to all 50 residents called me a threat to safety and property values. Then I found a pile of toxic construction debris, broken concrete, rusted nails, leaking paint cans dumped in my driveway. My new security cameras, installed after recent burglaries, were spray-painted black, and a note in Victoria's elegant handwriting was taped to my door: "Leave, or it gets worse." The next 3 nights were a blur of escalation. Night 1, a truck dumped more debris, sharp metal, and chemical barrels that cost me $500 to haul away. I installed hidden cameras with night vision and cloud storage, determined to catch her in the act. Night 2, that cost me $400 for new tires and a police report that went nowhere without a clear face on video. My electrical business took a hit as clients canceled, spooked by Victoria's smear campaign. In a small town, gossip is a death sentence. But night 3 broke me. At 2 a.m., I heard a chainsaw roaring. I ran outside to find Victoria's landscaping crew cutting down the 35-year-old maple tree my grandfather and I had planted when I was 10, a memorial to my mother, who died in a fire when I was a kid. That tree was my family's heart, where Granddad taught me to carve wood, where we'd hung a tire swing, where I'd sat after his funeral 2 years ago, feeling him in the rustling leaves. Now it was a stump, its branches crushing my fence and gutter. The damage was $3,000, but the loss was priceless. I stood there, sobbing like I hadn't since I was a boy, gripping the crew's abandoned chainsaw and fighting the urge to march to Victoria's mansion. But Granddad's voice stopped me. "Anger makes you weak, Ethan. Fight smart." I went inside and opened Granddad's old trunk, searching for the deed. Instead, I found a folder labeled Easement Agreement, Langley Property, 2009. It was a contract allowing Victoria's family to run power lines across our land to their estate. Buried in the fine print was a clause that stopped me cold. Easement voidable if grantee harasses or interferes with grantor or family. Granddad had been a clever man, building in a kill switch. Every act of Victoria's sure lies, vandalism, tree cutting was a contract violation. By dawn, I was on the phone with my old friend Caleb Reed, a property lawyer in Sacramento. "Ethan," he said, "this clause is a legal bazooka. You can cut her power, and she can't do a damn thing." The next day, I filed an easement termination with the county clerk, attaching Lynn's video, police reports, and camera footage. The clerk warned me the decision was final. Victoria's mansion would lose power permanently unless she rerouted lines at massive cost. I signed without hesitation. By evening, the power company confirmed they'd disconnect her service within 24 hours of court approval. Meanwhile, Victoria was in a frenzy, calling her lawyer, the mayor, anyone who'd listen. Her attorney admitted the harassment clause was airtight, leaving her no recourse. I offered her one last chance to settle, apologize publicly, pay for my tree and damages, and stop the harassment. She laughed in my face. "This is my town," she sneered. "I'll ruin you." At 6 p.m., the county texted, "Termination approved." Effective 7 a.m. I called the power company to confirm, and the supervisor, a guy named Miguel, chuckled. "Man, This is the cleanest revenge I've seen in 20 years. The next morning, my driveway was a spectacle. Two power company techs, Sheriff Harper, Lynn with a thermos of coffee, and a dozen neighbors gathered, some filming, others swapping stories of Victoria's tyranny. She came sprinting out at 6:55, bathrobe flapping, screaming into her phone, but no one answered. The crowd grew, sharing their own grievances, fines for ugly mailboxes, bans on kids' chalk drawings. It felt like a rebellion. At 7 a.m., Harper asked if I was sure. I looked at the stump where my mother's tree once stood and nodded. "This isn't revenge, Sheriff. It's justice," Victoria begged, offering to pay triple, but her threats from yesterday echoed in my mind. I flipped the breaker. Click. 3 seconds later, her mansion went dark. The AC unit stopped. The pool pumps died. The chandeliers faded. The crowd cheered like it was a touchdown. Victoria collapsed on her steps, sobbing, as her husband, Richard, pulled up and muttered, "What the hell did you do?" The fallout was brutal. Victoria faced $60,000 to reroute power, 10 weeks of generator rentals at $1,000 a week, and hotel bills in California's scorching summer. Her property value dropped $250,000. Worse, her reputation crumbled. The HOA ousted her, electing Lynn as president, who scrapped the petty rules. My business boomed as clients flocked to the guy who'd taken down the Queen of Willow Creek. A month later, Victoria's mansion was a dark, silent husk, its lawn patchy, its for sale sign crooked. Richard left her, and she moved to a condo in the city, her empire in ruins. But here's where it gets messy. Was I too harsh? Should I have accepted her last-minute plea? Did she deserve to lose everything, or did I cross a line? Comment below. Was this justice or vengeance? Would you have flipped the switch or let her off? If she begs for forgiveness, should I give her a second chance? Like and subscribe for more stories of neighbors getting what's coming or not.